Welcome to the Charter Oak Chess Club's YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going over a game played between Tigran Petrosian and Viktor Korchnoi, so two very strong players. We're going to look at the way Petrosian kind of makes these small, subtle moves to get a positional advantage by blocking all of his opponent's attacking ideas, and then of course launches his own attack at the end of the game. So let's get into it. The game starts out pawn to d4, pawn to e6, knight to f3, pawn to f5, so we've transposed into the Dutch. Let's see what happens here. When we're dealing with the Dutch, we're looking for three types of variations. We could have the Leningrad, which would have started with a quick pawn to g6. We could just have a classical Dutch with like d6 being played later, or we could get into the Stonewall, where we get this kind of zigzag with the pawns. Let's see what's played. It is going to be a Stonewall. And right here with pawn to c6, we see some of the main ideas. Black has made this very defensive structure, but it also has a very clear attacking plan. And you can actually play this as black or as white. And it's just one of those plans you can kind of do like automatically, and you always try to go for the same thing. You're going to castle. Queen to e8, that's kind of a weird move, but again, if you know the system or if you've played against it, queen e8, the whole idea, get on this diagonal, that way your queen can help get into the attack on the king side and throw this g-pawn. So we're going to see castle, queen e8, knight coming to e4, rook being lifted, right? Queen coming out here, pawn to g5, and just attack on the king side. We're not going to worry too much about our light square bishop. It might eventually come into the game if white decides to trade. But these are kind of the main ideas that we're going for. All right, how's Petrosian going to respond? Well, pawn to b3 was played. Castle king side is played. And now for a great move, bishop to a3. Bishop to a3 is a really fun move because bishop b2 seems a lot more natural. And instead, we're going to force black to trade off the really good dark squared bishop, right? When all their pawns are on light squares. For our dark squared bishop, when we already have this pawn in d4, that doesn't look like it's moving. So this was a good trade. Knight goes to the edge of the board. Now the queen's ready to jump over here, and Petrosian decides, I'm actually going to play knight to c2. And that might seem like a waste of a tempo, but Petrosian realizes in the book, The Most Instructive Games of Chess Ever Played by Irving Chernev, where this game has come from, it goes to explain that, you know, a really good chess player is just going to make sure to take care of the basics really quickly. I don't want to bring this knight to c2 later in the game when I have to suddenly need that knight to defend or continue attacking. The knight on a3 is really misplaced. Black still has multiple pieces to develop, especially because they took an extra queen move. So now is a perfect time to play knight c2. Then we can start connecting our rooks and continuing our development. All right, so queen comes over here, and now Petrosian finds another very nice move here. Queen c1. To be honest, I don't think queen c1 had been played up until this point, but it makes a lot of sense the more that you look at it. At first you're saying, well, why not just play queen to d2, right? Queen to d2 still attacks this diagonal, and it connects the rooks so that they're ready to play some chess. But then, okay, well, black just plays knight to e4, which they were going to play anyways, and now they're kicking the queen. So, okay, queen c1, like, what's the idea? Am I trying to play queen to a3? And no, the idea is we're just stopping this g4 move for one more move. And more importantly, this queen on the c file is going to turn out to be really, really useful should the game open up. All right, let's see what happens. Knight comes out, knight c to e1. Now, this is a great move because when you're playing in a closed position, you have to say, what are the key squares that I have? Where are the holes in the position that I can throw my knights to, right? And as someone that plays the prophylactic English almost every game, I actually did pretty well in a tournament simply because it was a symmetrical English. And black kind of played this move that made it look like the knight was advancing. A move like this, like let's say knight to e3, right? Looks like that knight's going up the board, or maybe knight to b4, right? In blitz games, these just seem like they're attacking more, they're moving up the board, right? But if you play a move like knight to e3, you quickly realize, okay, I'm putting pressure on the pawns, but not really, right? Because even if I trade, like, I don't know, we have here, capture, capture, neither of these pawns are really falling. They're very well defended, so this doesn't really make any sense. Instead, if you take the time and you realize, well, I have a really good control over this e5 square, wouldn't it make more sense to play knight to e1, and now I'm going to play knight d3, and one of my knights is going to occupy this e5 square with the other knight ready to jump in. So that's exactly what happens, and white gets there just in time as black continues to attack on the king side. And if we look at this position, It might be tempting to play queen takes e2, but Korchnoi just decides, I'm going to play king to h8. I'm going to bring my rook over here and continue to attack the king. And the trap is, if queen takes, you might have already guessed that this queen looks like it's getting trapped. The knights are defending each other. So a simple move like pawn to f3 solves a lot of problems for white. We can see this queen cannot move. Rook to f2 will be incoming. We're attacking the knight as well. So as the knight hops back, we're going to get our queen trapped. Well, maybe I'll play queen to d2 where I'm still defended and the queen can run away. But now we're going to trade, and believe it or not, the knight is also trapped. It simply has no squares that it can go to in time. Alright, so Korchnoi didn't play that. He decided I'm going to play king to h8, continue my attack. f3 is played, let's get that knight out of there. And now there's a few moves we could play here. Queen a3 is a very good move as well, just putting more pressure on those weak dark squares. But Petrosian went for another move. See if you can find it. It's a very clever idea. Okay, so the move that Petrosian goes for is pawn to e4. The reason I really love this move is that it's so complicated and it's not really on theme with anything else that's been happening in this game, right? We saw a lot of those prophylactic moves, right? Like queen to c1, guarding the g5 square, right? Just little moves that help, block a lot of black's ideas. So why e4 just like crashing open in the center? Well, Petrosian's a great attacking player, kind of never gets enough credit for that, because Petrosian's just known for his defense. And Tal is known as like the crazy attacking player. But of course, every strong world champion knows how to play both styles. And Petrosian realizes that it's time to crash with e4, even though it looks like black's whole plan was to guard this square. And right now they have more defense on this square. They have 3 defenders. We only have 2 attackers. What is the idea? Why does this work? Well, when this whole mess is done, we can pretty much bring it back to this bishop hasn't moved and the rooks are not connected. So there's actually back rank checkmate problems. So let's see what happens here. Let's say black decides, okay, in the game they play knight f7, but let's play a more natural move. Let's just take the pawn. Seems like the best way to defend, and we're going to win a pawn. So knight takes, and now the knight's attacking the rook, so black can't simply play pawn takes knight. Bishop takes. Now the knight goes over here, it's attacking the bishop. Rook has to go to defend. Pawn takes, and now this rook has a discovered attack. If rook takes, we're going to pick up the bishop for free. Again, that bishop being a real problem here. So rook takes, and queen takes is actually a threat as well. There's 2 threats that are hidden here, and just to highlight that, let's pretend black played an egregious move like pawn to a6. Can you find both of white's threats here? Alright, so one threat being queen to f6, pretty obvious fork, we're going to pick up the rook. And then the second threat is knight takes on d7, and if black simply recaptures, they've lost the game to checkmate. So okay, let's play a defensive move for black here. What do we do now? Well, we're still going to play check. King has to move, and now we can just simply say we won a pawn, and that's that. But more importantly, everything's tied down, right? This rook needs to defend the bishop, the queen needs to defend the rook, and white can just play rook to f1 and continue their attack. So king goes over here, rook to f1. All right, let's say they do nothing again. What's going to happen? Queen can check, king comes over here, and now we can just ladder mate. Let's just play a rook lift, rook to f4. If I try to defend this anyway, I'm probably just going to lose my queen, right? If I move my queen, I lose the rook. So let's give them pawn to h5. Well, now I'm going to ladder mate a different way. Just bring the queen over here, rook over here. Oh, sorry about that. Queen over here, rook over here. And there's not so much that black can do. This probably works as well. Maybe even knight check is a real annoying move to play here. But the most obvious move seems to be just rook to f6. And now I'm going to get this checkmate. And again, the knight can't come in. We'll simply take it. We're not going to take, so the rook can't come over here. And this game is pretty much over. So crazy to think that all the way back here, at first glance, pawn to e4 just looks impossible to play. There's way too many defenders. Black is already trying to crash through. It seems like we should just take our time, try to find some way to lock down the position or defend against this attack. But actually e4 simply works because Black never really completed their development. At the end of the day, their king is very weak as well. All right, so Korchnoi goes back, pawn takes, knight takes, pawn takes. And what we get when all is said and done is actually just a very good position for white. Notice how this bishop is incredibly active. We've forced Black to trade off these pawns, and suddenly we get this open file that has appeared out of nowhere that almost never happens in these types of structures. And the queen's going to go here and no one can stop it. There's no dark squared bishop. This knight is incredibly misplaced. It's got nowhere to go. This light squared bishop needs to get out of the way just to connect the rooks. Rook comes over here. They're not going to just let this d pawn hang. Queen comes over. They're hitting the knight. They're threatening to take the rook if the knight leaves. Pawn comes over here. Pawn take. And this really highlights the weak development of Black's position. So if the knight were to take, we would take the rook. If the queen were to take, we would simply take the knight. So everything is being held on by a thread here. And of course, these pawns are disconnected. We got 3 isolated pawns. All right, let's keep going here. Bishop move seemed like a pretty good move. We're pinning the knight to the rook. And now Black is ready to play rook to c8 and jump back into the game. So what could white play here? Well, they find pawn e6 is maybe a pretty good move as well. But what did white play in this position? They played knight to f4, and believe it or not, Black resigned. Even though the material imbalance is not huge, it's really, really tough to continue playing chess in this position, right? And for all the reasons we said. If the queen takes, we're simply going to take the knight. It doesn't seem like there's any good way to try to hold on to material. Let's play a move like rook to c8 and try to figure out what we can do. Well, now I'm still attacking this queen for free, so I can simply play check, knight takes, 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 and we're still up a whole piece and a pawn. So there's nothing good that Black can play here.